answer questions after she's done.
All right. Good. Mr. Oglesby.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair, Committee. Rob Oglesby, I'm the Executive Director for the California Energy Commission. A quick overview of our main responsibilities that are relevant to this. We administer a variety of programs, but we're often considered the state's planning and policy agency for energy, and I'll get more to that in a minute. But one of our core responsibilities is to do power plant siting for thermal power plants over 50 megawatts. That includes geothermal and solar thermal plants, as well as conventional natural gas plants. Part of our duties on the planning side include very ambitious multi-year projects that is still a work in progress, although much progress has been made, and it's the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. This is an effort that involves many agencies at many levels to essentially do an assessment of the resources that are appropriate to develop in the desert area, 22 million acres, identifying areas that are sensitive and need to be protected, and also identifying areas that have resources that would be valuable to be developed as renewable energy resources. As part of, so it's more akin to an environmental, a programmatic environmental impact report than another type of document, but essentially it's a very large-scale planning document that tries to identify the appropriate resources for development in that area. With respect to Imperial County, the estimate that coming out of that is roughly 8,000 megawatts of potentially available renewable resources could be developed in the Imperial County. Of that, it breaks out to about roughly 5,000 megawatts in various forms of solar, but about 3,000 megawatts of geothermal. To help work with our local agencies in that area as we do this planning process, the Energy Commission, pursuant to legislation that was adopted a couple of years ago, has entered into memorandums of understanding and awarded grants to help a collaborative planning process. We are currently working with the Imperial County. We've awarded $1.1 million in this effort. That collaboration is in progress. In Riverside County, we have about $700,000 that's been provided in accordance with a memorandum of understanding. So really, very, very briefly, we've worked hard to be sensitive in the development of renewable resources in this environment, collaborate with our sister agencies at all levels of government, and continue to work to provide appropriate development of renewable resources in that area. One add-on at the very end, we've also for a long time, since 1981, operated a grant program to help geothermal. Specifically, we've awarded $74 million during the course of that program. So with that, I'll conclude and respond to questions.
Thank you. I will be asking a question when we get through the speakers regarding the amount that continues to be put forward at 8,000 megawatts, at some point 14, at some point CalISO said 0 megawatts. So maybe towards the end we can get into the questions and comments on that. But the next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Member Dodd. I'm Karen Edson with the California Independent System Operator. You're going to hear me touching on some of the issues that you've already heard from others about, especially Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Singh. I really like this idea of flexibility between the ears. What I want to impress on you is how different the system is today than it was just 20 years ago, or less than 20 years ago. That's when in 2006, we had our all-time peak, and we were in very serious risk of significant outages because we didn't have enough. We're at risk of not having enough power to serve California customers. We got through that summer without having to curtail in that all-time peak and all-time peak conditions. But that was the mode we were in. You plan for that summer peak demand. We're now in a situation where with the renewable energy on our system, and particularly solar, which is providing power during the middle of the day in the summer, so it's there when we hit our peak load for the most part, we're seeing room in the system now that we don't have that same risk for summer peak problems. There's still issues. Things still happen. Lots of things can change. But the kind of systemic system planning and concern about that is a little tempered now by the level of renewable generation. In fact, the renewable generation is pushing our peak out in the summer. It used to be your peak was at 4 p.m. Now there's so much solar on the system, you hit the peak when the sun starts to set. That's exactly the problem we have with the so-called duck curve you saw. That's showing a March day when the sun sets before we hit peak load. People get home from work after dark. The electricity comes on. So the sun has gone down, and we have to have generation available to meet that peak when people come home for work. And that creates some of the operational challenges you heard about. The good news, and in the good news is the challenge, is that we worry now a lot about too much generation and too much generation in the middle of the day. So what we have before us is really an opportunity to put that generation to work to further decarbonize the grid, something that Mr. Caldwell spoke about at some length. You can do that with storage. We've heard about storage. You can address this problem. You can electrify transportation. There are lots of things you can do that will further decarbonize with that surplus. The least costly things you can do is you can diversify the portfolio so you're not having as much of an impact on that middle of the day issue, or you can provide a regional market where you can sell that surplus. Mr. Singh spoke about that. It's an opportunity for California to export its very valuable renewable resources. So you will hear us talk a lot about the importance of creating that kind of regional market. We're doing some of that now. We have a very short-term, every 5-minute market, which kind of makes the mind spin a bit, but that we have now that we're offering outside of California. A number of states are either in that market or they've agreed to come in. They're in the implementation process. So Pacific Corp is part of that market. They serve 5 states in addition to California: Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. Their loads are in, bits of load are in some of those states. Nevada Energy will start up in that market this fall. And Arizona Public Service is scheduled to come into that market along with a Seattle utility in the fall of 2016. So we're starting to do things to get to those regional opportunities. They get us a little bit of it. They don't get us all we can get, and will take more effort on our part and yours. So when you come right down to it, the solutions to this are really what I call the all of the above solutions. You need all of these things to happen, and you want to be moving forward on them simultaneously. As I think Mr. Caldwell said, it's not picking one of these things as a solution. It's doing all of these things as a solution. You can even do things like retrofit existing fossil power plants to make them more flexible so that they can go lower or move more quickly through their operating range. We can procure, as he and Mr. Singh noted, reliability services from renewable generators, and we're working on policies to be able to do that and to be able to compensate for those services. So those are all very important things to acknowledge. Before I finish, I'll touch on the transmission issues. Mr. Miller, at the beginning of this workshop, spoke to them, I think, but I'll just reiterate that we plan the transmission system around the state's procurement plans. So we take those procurement assumptions from the state and plan a transmission system to meet those objectives. We did have import issues from the Imperial Irrigation District associated with unexpected impacts of the closure of the San Onofre nuclear plant. That was a 2,200 megawatt plant that affected flows all over Southern California. But those changes have largely been mitigated now by new generation and new transmission coming into service. So we are now at a point where we know we have between 500 and 750 megawatts of import capability from the Imperial area, in addition to generation already providing the services. In closing, I want to acknowledge important work that's underway with regard to the geothermal industry specifically and its ability to engage in this kind of more dynamic market. In particular, I'll note that the California Energy Commission is funding work being performed by Calpine. Calpine operates most of the geysers power plants, geothermal resource area in Northern California, to see what additional flexibility they can get from that resource. That's a steam resource. It's different than Imperial resource, where you have hot water and a more complicated heat exchange system. But you have, with regard to that technology, you have ORMAT that has new design that will allow that geothermal production to be flexible and not necessarily operate always in a baseload configuration. So the industry is changing. We're all changing our thinking, and I think it's, again, an all-of-the-above solution to get us to these higher levels that we all aspire to.
Thank you. Segue into our last presenter here, Mr. Kevin Calley, General Manager of Imperial Irrigation District. Welcome.
Yes, thanks to the chair, the lone remaining member of the
I was just going to say, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I have to run, and
That's fine.
you're going to cut your audience here, at least up here, by half.
That's
So,
fine. I'll call you after.
yeah, I hate to miss the finale.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, though. I do want to, just at the outset, say that your useful synopsis on Salton Sea, I read it here, and there's a section in there about initiatives that are in the offing now. And the one thing I didn't see in there that I think is the predicate for all of the activity you're seeing at the Salton Sea is that IID and its partner Imperial County, who've spent the last 12 years litigating over the water we're transferring somewhere else, joined together and went across the street to the State Water Board and said, we're all about to fall off the cliff in 2017 when the mitigation water goes away. And what does the state of California propose to do about it?
You're stealing my thunder, Mr. Kevin Calley.
I'm trying to help you. But that question is a live one.
Yeah.
And that petition we filed is a live document. We're encouraged that the administration has formed a task force, that there seems to be some real movement now at the Salton Sea. But unlike all of the previous speakers, the Salton Sea is not an esoteric subject to me. It's a real place. And there are real people who are going to be affected, for better or worse, right away. Now, it's been deja vu all over again for me, because this time last year, Senator Wesso, who was here earlier, had a bill moving. And it was for 500 megawatts, a modest amount of geothermal. Didn't say it had to be from the Salton Sea. People understood implicitly that that's what we were talking about. And it came up short. And the reason it came up short is because the CPUC and my friends here at the ISO and virtually all of the investor-owned utilities showed up before these committees and implored people that there was no need for it in the portfolio. It was too expensive. The grid couldn't handle it. And IID couldn't deliver it. About a year ago, the ISO put out a technical paper that said IID's effective deliverability, the maximum import capability out of our balancing authority, was 0. And they ascribed that to the loss of songs. I'm heartened to hear that now all is forgiven and there's 750 megawatts that's available. But what they're not telling you is that only 250 of that is in the IID BA, and that's because we have projects that miraculously came up with purchase power agreements. The other 500 is in this amorphous area called the Imperial Valley Competitive Renewable Energy Zone. Is that what you're calling it?
Imperial Zone.
Well, that Imperial Zone is 98% within our service area. Mm-hmm. And it's to accommodate projects that interconnect directly to the ISO and circumvent IID entirely. So I would submit to you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for holding this hearing, that IID finds itself whipsawed between this procurement process, least cost, best fit. You know, that duck chart, you ought to call it the Loch Ness Monster, because what it's showing is a choice that this state's made in procurement where solar's just dominated. So this is an overgeneration problem created by the state of California. So is there a place for geothermal in a balanced portfolio? Well, of course there is. And there was a year ago. Mm-hmm. And there was the year before that. IID's been coming up here talking about what to do at the Salton Sea and the importance of using renewable resources unique to the Salton Sea, including the largest known untapped geothermal resource in the hemisphere, as a platform for some sort of restoration model that can be sustainable as that shoreline recedes. We went to the State Water Board in April, and we did that in the throes of this historic drought. And we said, you know, the nation's largest agricultural to urban water transfer can only stand if something is done at the Salton Sea right now, so we have some confidence that there's a going forward plan 10 years from now. 10 years is the right horizon for transmission planning and for resource procurement. The planning cycle that Ms. Edson refers to, the annual transmission plan, IID finds itself as an independent balancing authority, standing on the sidelines, hoping from year to year that it'll come down somewhere between 1,400 megawatts of deliverability and zero. That's not the kind of certainty that our generators vying for purchase power agreements can compete on an equal basis. So we're still looking for some relief. We've yet to find it, and I don't think that the ISO is a disinterested spectator, just observing this antiseptic process in which everybody competes on a level playing field. I've been told, you know, the ISO doesn't pick winners and losers, and I think technically that's probably true, because to be a winner or a loser, you got to be in the game. And the way the rules are structured right now for IID, we're not even on the field. So thank you for holding this hearing and for letting IID take part in it.
All right. Anything that any of the other speakers would like to add, maybe a minute to add to any of the conversation that's taken place at this time? Okay. I think you answered my question in terms of the inconsistency that's been seen as it relates to the amount of energy opportunities that exist in that area. From a public policy standpoint, what would be top 2 or 3 actions that you would recommend, Mr. Kelly, if you were on this side of the dais?
Well, I'd like to see some acknowledgement that these twin policy goals of a bold RPS standard of 50% or more and this climate initiative that is even bolder, that the nexus between those two policy aims belong at the Salton Sea. Mm-hmm. You know, Imperial County isn't in the state of Arizona. It's the 58th of the 58 counties. It can be a real secret weapon in the arsenal available to the state for both climate and RPS. Now, the RPS that has gone to this point geothermal, there's been one new geothermal facility constructed at Salton Sea, and the off-taker is Salt River Project in Arizona. So why should that resource be good enough for Arizona, but not for California?
Point. Okay. Thank you very much to the panelists. We're going to open this up for public comments, and we'll ask our speakers to keep their comments to a short, maybe a minute and a half or two at the most. Please introduce yourself if you represent an organization. Please do so. Add to the conversation, and we'll begin. First speaker.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Keys, Eagle Crest Energy, and I was pleased with the whole presentation today. We need everything. What we're offering is a 1,300 megawatt pump storage facility project. You've got the geothermal in the south of your district. We happen to be in the north. And we're looking at coming online in 2020 or 2021 if we get our final contracts. We have our water permits. We have our FERC license. We have virtually everything we need now. What we need to do is find a way for bulk storage to fit into the process of at the PUC. Right now, they only buy basically generation. We're offering a service to take care of that over generation, and if we can figure out some way to pay for that, we'll move forward. We'll continue to talk with you.
Anyone else wishing to address the committee?
Thank you. Gretchen Newsom, representing IBEW Local 569. We represent over 3,100 families in San Diego and Imperial counties. I wanted to impart to you that our families and our members are very concerned about the Salton Sea and the health effects that could be coming down the pipeline as the sea rescinds and then the particulate matter gets into the air and causes lung disease, asthma, cancer, etc. So our members are very concerned about that, but we too see the value in drawing the nexus between the Salton Sea problem and crisis and the opportunity and the resources that exist with geothermal in the surrounding area, and the opportunity to also to address the poverty that occurs in Imperial County with good middle-class jobs that would come from investing in geothermal and building and maintaining new geothermal facilities. So we hope for solutions, and we're ready to build. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Gary Wyatt with Imperial County, and I stand here to not only stand with our partners of the Imperial Irrigation District, but also to bring about, talk about just briefly about our partnership with the IID, and as we've worked together for many, many years on the issues surrounding the Salton Sea, we'll continue to do so. But we have a great deal of agreement with IID on this issue, and we look forward to working with your committee and others in Sacramento as we come to solution for the future of the Salton Sea and for the resources that surround that. We do believe that we can be great players and a great part in the future of California and a balanced portfolio for the energy in California.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the committee? Okay, seeing none, I'll just close with a couple comments. Thank you all for participating today. Very valuable information that we get to share today, and certainly how we summarize today's conversation, and it becomes a segue into a specific conversation on the Salton Sea restoration in our second hearing. As was mentioned, there is a significant amount of attention and momentum around these issues related to energy in Imperial Valley and the Salton Sea restoration, to the point that the governor has put together a working group, a task force of different directors of the different departments who will play a role in this effort. The budget has also included some resources to be able to have someone bring the groups together, both state agencies and our local stakeholders, to begin looking at the viable options as they relate to any mitigation and restoration to the sea. As was mentioned by the general manager, on March 18th of this year, with the coalescing forces between Imperial County and the Imperial Irrigation District. A petition was presented to State Water Resources Control Board, where we also had over 100 plus entities, individuals from the local community coming before the Water Board to ensure that the state's attention to this issue becomes a priority. As we all know, in 2017, there are scheduled water transfers per the QSA that will commence decreasing the sea water level, exposing dry lake bed, and impacting the already poor air quality conditions of the region. Of course, when we talk about the poor air quality, we talk about the impacts to public health. We've had a number of discussions over the course of years in terms of a price tag to this restoration effort, whether it was a $9 billion Salton Sea alternative that was presented that we all have agreed is not feasible, to a $70 billion impact at the low figure of doing nothing, a $70 billion impact to the local regional economy. And of course, we cannot put a price tag to the health and well-being of the people who live within the region. As I mentioned, the committee is the Salton Sea restoration with renewable energy playing a key role. That is the title of this committee, and we're going to keep the conversation focused on that. We believe that the energy industry in Imperial County can play a vital role in the restoration efforts of the sea. As I mentioned, this is one of 2 hearings that we will have. We will begin the conversation with a summary of today's hearing and get specifically into the restoration ideas and proposals at our next hearing. With that, I'd like to again thank everyone who participated in today's discussion, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in July here in Sacramento. And we are also looking at bringing a third conversation to the district at the Salton Sea, whether Imperial County or Eastern Riverside County, so that our locals have an opportunity to have a say in this discussion. With that, thank you again, and this committee hearing is adjourned.